It was supposed to be just another Tuesday. Lunchbox packed, hair in a sloppy braid, Maddie Walker flashed her gap-toothed smile and slammed the car door behind her. See you at 3, Daddy, she called over her shoulder. Ethan Walker, running on 4 hours of sleep and 2 cups of gas station coffee, gave a tired wave and watched her skip toward the school. By 3:07, she was gone. By 3:15, the entire town of Fair Hollow had lost its breath, and by midnight, her father had already given up. The sign in front of Fair Hollow Elementary still read "Book Fair this week" in cheerful block letters. Bright paper cutouts of butterflies lined the windows. But the parking lot was empty now, cordoned off by yellow tape and the stony silence of disbelief. Ethan stood alone by the flagpole, fists clenched, staring down the front entrance like it had betrayed him. "She was supposed to walk out that door," he said. Deputy Klein cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Walker, we've reviewed the footage. Maddie left school early. A woman signed her out. Name was Amanda Carson?" Ethan's heart dropped. "I don't know any Amanda Carson." Klein glanced over his clipboard. "She had all the right credentials, even knew your license plate number. Said there was a family emergency. The front office staff didn't question it. That was the problem. No one ever questioned things until they were too far gone." Ethan rubbed his eyes, already raw from tears and lack of sleep. "You're telling me someone walked in, said my daughter had a family emergency, and just took her?" Klein shifted, unsure. "We're treating this as an abduction now. FBI's been notified." Ethan didn't hear the rest. His mind spiraled back to that morning. Her worn purple backpack, the smell of strawberry shampoo, the "I love you, Daddy" yelled from across the parking lot. It had all felt too normal to be the last time. Back home, the silence was unbearable. The house still held her voice, her drawings on the fridge, her favorite pink hoodie tossed over the couch. And in the corner, curled tightly by the front door, was Daisy. The old German shepherd lifted her head when Ethan walked in, ears twitching, eyes watchful. "Not now," he muttered, stepping around her. But Daisy didn't move. She kept staring at the door as if waiting for someone else. Ethan and Maddie had gotten Daisy 3 years earlier, shortly after his wife passed. Maddie was 6. The shelter had listed Daisy as retired canine. Calm temperament, good with children, some mild hip issues. She hadn't barked once that day, just leaned into Maddie's touch like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Now Daisy was 13, gray-muzzled, slow-moving. Everyone assumed her best years were behind her, but that night, she was different. At 2:13 a.m., Ethan awoke to barking, not the lazy, half-hearted kind. This was sharp, urgent. He stumbled down the hall, heart pounding. "Daisy, quiet!" he hissed, flipping on the porch light. But she wasn't barking at nothing. She stood at the window, paws against the glass, growling low and long toward the woods behind the house. Ethan stepped closer, scanning the yard. Empty. "It's just nerves," he muttered. "You're just old, confused." But Daisy didn't stop. Not until sunrise. The next day, while the town buzzed with helicopters and reporters and FBI vans, Daisy slipped out. Ethan didn't even notice she was gone until evening. He found the back gate unlatched and paw prints leading into the woods. "Daisy!" he yelled, furious and exhausted. He cursed under his breath. "Of course, first Maddie, now you." He didn't go after her, but Daisy came back. 12 hours later, limping, soaked and shaking, with a shoelace in her mouth. Purple, knotted, frayed at one end. Ethan stared. That looks like..." He rushed to Maddie's room, pulled open her drawer. The left sneaker was still there, its laces intact, but the right one, missing. If you believe in the power of animals and the quiet ways they save us, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. More real stories like this are waiting to be told, and every share keeps their voices heard. The FBI wasn't convinced. "It could have come from anywhere," Agent Monroe said, turning the shoelace over in gloved hands. "Dogs pick up all kinds of debris. You know how scent-driven they are." "She found that in the woods behind the school," Ethan said flatly. "Same woods you said you cleared." The agent didn't answer. "Look," Ethan tried again. "You don't understand. Daisy doesn't just bark at shadows. She was trained. She was K9 before she came to us. She's not..." "Not what?" Monroe asked gently. Ethan's voice broke. "She's not wrong." By the third night, Daisy had led Ethan to 3 more clues. A tattered ribbon, a gum wrapper Maddie had bought from the school vending machine, and a piece of lined notebook paper with half of Maddie's name still visible through the dirt. Each time, Ethan hadn't wanted to believe it, but he followed. Each time, Daisy never wavered. Neighbors started to notice. "I saw that dog by the creek at dawn," one man said. "She was sniffing around the old logging trail," another claimed. "She stared at me like she wanted me to follow her," said one of the search volunteers. Daisy became legend almost overnight. But for Ethan, she was still just Maddie's dog, the one who curled up by her bed when she had nightmares, the one who listened better than he did. By day 6, hope was drying up. Fair Hollow was moving on. The press was leaving. The tips stopped coming in. But Daisy didn't stop. That night, Ethan found her standing at the edge of the woods, staring into the darkness like it owed her something. He hesitated. Then for the first time since Maddie vanished, he whispered, "All right, girl, show me." And without hesitation, Daisy began to walk. Ethan Walker hadn't been in those woods since high school. Back then, he'd taken Maddie's mom there for long walks, back when life had edges, but they weren't sharp yet, before grief made everything jagged. Now he trudged behind Daisy with a flashlight, heart thudding louder than the cicadas around him. His boots sank into damp leaves. The air smelled like pine, moss, and something else, something old. The German shepherd moved with eerie purpose, nose low, tail stiff. Her joints were stiff with age, but she didn't limp. She didn't hesitate. It was like she knew exactly where she was going. "Daisy, slow down," Ethan called out. She didn't. She paused only to sniff the base of a tree, then pressed deeper into the underbrush, past the point where normal people stopped walking, past the ATV paths, past comfort. Ethan hadn't planned to follow this far, but now he couldn't stop. 15 minutes in, she stopped. She nosed at a patch of loose dirt beneath an old, hollowed-out birch tree. Ethan knelt, brushed the leaves away, and spotted something. Plastic, purple, bent in half. He picked it up and turned it in his hand. A pencil topper, shaped like a unicorn. Maddie's. He remembered the day she bought it from the school book fair. "It's lucky," she'd said, "like a charm for when I'm scared." He knelt there a long time, frozen. Daisy sat beside him, eyes watching. By the time they made it back to the house, the sun was rising and Ethan's hands were trembling. He poured himself a glass of water, then another. The silence pressed in on all sides. He picked up the unicorn topper again. Could have been a coincidence, could have been garbage, but it wasn't. He took a picture and sent it to Agent Monroe. The reply came back fast. "That's something. Let's talk." That afternoon, Ethan sat on the porch with Daisy beside him. Monroe parked her unmarked SUV out front and stepped out with a coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. She wore jeans, a black windbreaker, and a tired expression that told him she hadn't slept either. She leaned on the porch railing. "You sure about this, Ethan?" "Absolutely." Monroe opened the folder. "We ran a scent profile on Daisy from the shoelace you brought earlier. Just out of curiosity, turns out she's still highly reactive, more than some of the active canines we've got in the field." Ethan looked at Daisy. The old dog sat tall, her head turning toward the woods again. "She's not done yet," he said. At 7 p.m., Daisy stood in the hallway outside Maddie's room and started barking again. But this time it wasn't frantic. It was sharp, specific. Ethan came running. "What is it?" Daisy nudged open Maddie's door with her snout. She walked to the bookshelf, sniffed one of the lower drawers, and sat. Ethan opened it. Notebooks, crayons, sketches, old spelling tests, and tucked between two coloring books, a folded piece of paper. He opened it. It was a map, drawn in crayon and pen, labeled with arrows and words like secret path, log tunnel, and big tree with scratch. And in the center was a red X. He showed it to Monroe the next day. She studied it, brow furrowed. This could be a child's imagination. Ethan shook his head. Not Maddie's. She didn't draw just to draw. She liked puzzles. They scanned it into the system. The mapping team cross-referenced it with terrain scans from the area. After 20 minutes, Monroe's laptop chimed. "There's a match," she said. "Where?" "Abandoned mining land. 2 miles past county lines. No active permits, no cameras. Locals call it Lost Hollow." Ethan's blood ran cold. Lost Hollow. He hadn't heard that name in years. His grandfather used to tell stories about it. Caves and tunnels. Places kids dared each other to explore on Halloween. But someone had clearly been there recently. Monroe closed the laptop. "We're assembling a team." Daisy stood up at the same moment. The next morning, a small convoy of agents met at the edge of Lost Hollow. Ethan stood beside Daisy, glancing around the overgrown path. It felt wrong. Too quiet. Even the birds stayed away. Daisy sniffed the air, then looked back at Ethan. "You ready?" he asked. She didn't bark. She just walked. The first real clue came 10 minutes in. Daisy led them to a cluster of saplings bent in a V shape, just like the one marked on Maddie's map. There, buried under pine needles, was a pink hair clip. Broken. Ethan picked it up. It was sticky with dried sap and blood. He handed it silently to Monroe. Her face hardened. This confirms it. Someone brought her here. But the trail went cold after that. The brush got thicker. Trees blocked GPS signals. The path Maddie marked on the map disappeared into a thicket no adult could fit through. Daisy sat at the edge and refused to move. Back in town, Ethan sat in his truck outside the grocery store trying to breathe. He was starting to feel the hope again, and he hated it. Hope made the fall worse. He reached for his phone to call Monroe, but before he could, Daisy nudged his arm with her nose. Hard. What? She pawed the glove box. He frowned, opened it, and froze. Inside was a key ring, silver, dusty. It wasn't his. He held it up, confused. Daisy barked once. They brought the key to the station. Turns out, it belonged to an old ranger shed deep in the woods of Lost Hollow, one the county had boarded up years ago. No one had bothered to check it. Until now. The agents went in first, weapons drawn. It was empty, dusty, smelled like mold and pine cleaner. But in the corner was an empty cage, child-sized. And next to it, taped to the wall, was a drawing. It was of Daisy. Crayon, messy but unmistakable. Underneath it, Maddie had written in uneven lettering. "She's coming." Ethan's knees gave out. He dropped to the floor of the shed, hands on the concrete. Daisy stood beside him, head bowed low. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in Maddie's room, the drawing from the shed in his lap. Daisy lay at the foot of the bed, staring at the door. "Why her?" Ethan whispered. "Why would someone take her?" He didn't expect an answer, but in the silence he heard it. The front gate creaked open. The gate wasn't supposed to move. Ethan hadn't opened it in days. It had rusted shut years ago, the hinges stiff with time and disuse. But now, under moonlight and the eerie calm of 2:17 a.m., it was wide open. He crept onto the porch barefoot, shotgun in hand, heart galloping. The breeze was sharp. The yard was silent. Daisy padded beside him without a sound. She didn't growl. She didn't bark. She stared straight ahead, toward the back fence where the woods began. And then she took off running. Ethan's flashlight flickered as he chased after her, bare feet snapping twigs and slipping on roots. He called out once, "Daisy," but she didn't look back. Not even for a second. She was locked in. Driven, the same dog who had once refused to get off the couch during thunderstorms, now sprinted into the forest like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. Maybe someone else's did too. They reached the base of a hollowed-out hill, where a shallow creek trickled through rocks. Daisy paused, sniffed hard, then began digging. Frantic, paws flying. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her and started pulling away wet leaves and dirt. His nails cracked. The flashlight beam jittered. Sweat soaked through his t-shirt despite the cold. Then his fingers hit metal. A small tin lunchbox, rusted at the hinges, sealed with duct tape. He pulled it out, heart in his throat. Inside, a worn Ziploc bag containing a drawing, a folded note, and a key. The drawing showed Daisy again, this time with Maddie riding on her back like a knight on a horse. Above them, the words "Home Finder." The note, written in shaky child handwriting, read, "If you're reading this, then Daisy found you. I'm okay, but they moved me. The man smells like gant and smoke. He said Daddy can't find me, but Daisy can." Ethan sat back on his heels, shaking. Daisy leaned against him just slightly, not pushing, not begging, just anchoring. It was the first time he cried without shame. At dawn, he met Agent Monroe in the parking lot of the sheriff's department. She looked at the note in silence. "Smoke and gas," she said. "That's a clue. Could mean a mechanic. Oil field. Abandoned property. We'll run scent samples again, compare to known suspects." Ethan handed her the key. This was in the box. Monroe turned it over. "Garage key, old model, no tag, probably aftermarket." Then she paused. "Your wife, she used to be a journalist, right?" Ethan stiffened. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Maybe everything." Sarah Walker had been stubborn. Ethan used to call it bulldog tenacity. She never dropped a lead, never stopped digging, sometimes even when it was dangerous. Right before she died, she'd been investigating something, but she never told Ethan what. Said it wasn't ready, said it would make people nervous. After her death, he found her laptop wiped clean. Only one file remained, a scanned article draft with the title, "Behind Closed Gates, Unregistered Youth Facilities in Rural Georgia." He deleted it. He didn't want to remember. Now, standing in the hallway of the station, Ethan realized that maybe Sarah hadn't been chasing a story. Maybe she'd been building a case. Back home, Ethan opened Maddie's closet for the first time in weeks. It still smelled like her, strawberry shampoo and vanilla lotion. Daisy stood at the doorway waiting. Ethan knelt down and pulled out an old box of school projects. Underneath the macaroni art and science fair ribbons, he found a spiral-bound notebook, Maddie's adventure journal. He flipped through sketches of castles, mazes, fantasy maps, then tucked in the very back a new page, labeled What I Know But Can't Say. It listed, he drives a red truck. He said he knows Daddy. He wears orange gloves. He takes pictures with his phone. He smells like the gas station by the school. Ethan closed the notebook and gripped it with both hands. 2 hours later, Agent Monroe and a small team reviewed the list. Monroe pinched the bridge of her nose. Red truck and orange gloves. That lines up with someone we flagged 2 days ago. Who? Ethan asked. Name's Vince Hargrove, owns a tire and oil shop on Route 9. Has a record, nothing huge, just petty theft, trespassing. But he's been a blip on our radar before. Liked to volunteer with kids camps and mentorship programs. Has he been questioned? He's disappeared. Monroe tapped a file. Went off-grid 3 weeks ago, but we've pinged his phone once. Guess where? Lost Hollow, Ethan said, his mouth dry. Monroe nodded. We think Maddie was held there for the first few days, then moved. She glanced toward Daisy, and I think this dog has been tracking that movement ever since. That night, the town held a candlelight vigil. Ethan didn't go. He sat on the floor of Maddie's room, the notebook open on his lap, Daisy curled beside him. At 11:42 p.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. A voice, male, cold, too calm. She's alive. Ethan's blood froze. But if you want her to stay that way, you'll stop sending dogs to sniff around my property. Then the call ended. No trace, no follow-up, just silence. But that voice, it was real. Ethan turned to Daisy. She was standing now, ears pinned, body tense. At 3 a.m., Ethan heard a car start outside. He looked out the window. Nothing. But Daisy was at the door again, this time scratching. He opened it, expecting her to dart out. Instead, she turned to look at him, then walked slowly to the back fence. Ethan grabbed his coat. All right, he whispered. Lead the way. They walked for nearly an hour, deeper into the woods, past trails, through thorns, across frozen creek beds. Finally, they stopped at an old drainage pipe. Daisy sniffed once, then growled low. Ethan knelt down, flashlight shaking. Inside the pipe, he saw scratch marks on the concrete and writing, carved with a rock or something sharp. Daddy. Ethan broke. He pressed his hand to the letters. She was here. Daisy nuzzled his side. They called the FBI field team. By morning, the area was taped, tagged, and scanned. No Maddie. But Monroe found a burned SIM card under a pile of leaves nearby. Whoever had brought Maddie there didn't want to leave a trail. But they had. Later that day, Monroe pulled Ethan aside. There's something else. Maddie's voice was picked up on a traffic cam mic near Route 43. Just a few words. She was singing a lullaby. Ethan's throat tightened. Sarah's lullaby, he said. She used to sing it when Maddie was scared. Monroe handed him a file. We've narrowed it down to 3 possible routes, all lead through the marshlands. And one of them ends at an old bait shop owned by, guess who? Vince Hargrove. Exactly. Ethan turned to Daisy. The old dog stood tall, gaze locked on him, tail flicking once. She wasn't just helping. She was guiding. She was hunting. Let's go get her, Ethan whispered. Daisy barked once, and they headed into the dark. Ethan never believed in signs. Not the spiritual kind, not the cosmic, everything happens for a reason kind. But as he sat in his truck that morning, staring out at the overgrown marsh trail, where Vince Hargrove's name kept showing up, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was pushing him forward. And Daisy, she wasn't just pushing. She was pulling. The trail to the bait shop was barely more than 2 ruts in the mud, swallowed by cattails and cypress. It smelled like old rain and motor oil, the kind of place teenagers dared each other to sneak into, the kind of place where things got buried, especially the kind no one wanted found. Ethan parked under a rotted closed sign. Daisy was already out the door, nose to the ground, tail stiff like a compass needle. Easy, Ethan whispered. He loaded the small revolver Monroe had given him, not because he knew how to use it, but because she insisted. Just in case, she'd said. He followed Daisy toward the side of the building. The bait shop was sagging under its own weight, windows boarded, door padlocked with rust. But Daisy didn't care about the door. She veered off toward the side, where a sheet of aluminum siding had been recently disturbed. She barked once, short, sharp, urgent. Ethan dropped to one knee and pulled the panel back. A tunnel. No, a vent. Leading down. Monroe arrived 20 minutes later with backup. Her boots crunched gravel as she jogged over. Tell me this is the break we need. It's more than that, Ethan said. She marked it. He pointed at the ground. Someone, probably Maddie, had drawn a heart in the mud with a stick. Inside it, D+D. Daisy and Daddy, Ethan whispered. That's what she always called us. Like we were superheroes. Monroe put a hand on his shoulder. Let's bring her home. Agents crawled into the vent first. It ran deeper than expected, connecting to a dried-out drainage pipe, leading to a trapdoor in the floor of an old storage shed behind the shop. Inside, they found a mattress on the floor, a bucket of clean water, a Barbie missing a leg, and a single granola bar wrapper with Maddie written in purple marker on the back. She was here, Monroe said, probably within the last 24 hours. Ethan stared at the mattress like it might still be warm. But where is she now? Back at the station, the tech team finally cracked the burned SIM card found at the last site. Photos, dozens of them, most blurry, some too dark to see. But one stood out, a photo of Maddie asleep on that same mattress, clutching Daisy's old chew toy. Ethan's knees buckled. She still has it, he whispered. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep again. He sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, flipping through Maddie's sketchbook for the 100th time. It still smelled faintly of syrup and crayon wax. Daisy lay under the table, paws twitching in a dream. Then Ethan noticed something he'd missed, a drawing on the inside back cover. It was a tree, gnarled and leafless, with a hollow trunk. And next to it, scribbled in small letters, "Tree has a secret. Mommy said always check the roots." Ethan's breath caught. The next morning, he and Daisy returned to the woods behind their house, where the oldest tree on the property stood like a century from another time. It had a hollow base big enough for a child to crawl into. Maddie used to pretend it was her fairy castle. Ethan knelt beside it, dug with his hands. Daisy barked once, then began to dig beside him. Within minutes, they uncovered a metal lunchbox wrapped in plastic. Inside, a thumb drive, a folded piece of cloth, and a note. The note was in Sarah's handwriting. If you're reading this, something's gone wrong. I've been investigating a man named Hargrove. He's connected to a chain of unregistered camps, fake mentorship programs, even a church in Tifton. I've hidden evidence here in case I disappear. Trust Daisy. She's trained for more than just comfort. Ethan leaned back, stunned. All this time, Sarah had known. Monroe plugged the drive into the FBI laptop. Video files, emails, GPS logs. It painted a picture bigger than either of them had imagined. Vince Hargrove wasn't just a mechanic with a criminal past. He was the local link in a much wider network, a group using youth mentorship as a front to abduct, relocate, and traffic kids across state lines. Maddie had found out, likely by accident, or maybe Sarah had told her bits and pieces. Either way, they'd taken her to silence the family. But Daisy hadn't let that happen. Every breadcrumb, every trail, every place Maddie had been, Daisy had led them there. Monroe turned to Ethan, dead serious. That dog's better than half my team. Ethan smiled, tired and proud. She's not just a dog. Later that afternoon, Monroe got a ping. Traffic camera, red truck, same model as Hargrove's. Captured near a remote farmhouse north of the state line, 2 hours from Fair Hollow. A witness at a nearby gas station remembered something odd. A little girl in the passenger seat, singing. She was humming some lullaby, the witness had said. Soft, but it stuck with me. Ethan's throat tightened. It was the lullaby Sarah used to sing to Maddie every night. They prepped fast. Local authorities, federal backup, K-9 support. But Ethan didn't care about any of that. He sat in the back of the command SUV with Daisy's head resting on his knee, whispering to her like a prayer. Just one more time, girl, he said. You get me close. I'll do the rest. She licked his hand, slow and steady. They rolled up to the farmhouse after midnight. No lights on, no sound. Monroe gave the signal. Agents moved in, tactful, quiet, trained. But Daisy didn't wait. She leapt from the truck, charged toward the barn. Ethan barely kept up. She reached the side of the structure and began scratching at the boards like her paws were on fire. Monroe yelled, I've got something! The team forced the door open. Inside, a cot, a space heater, food wrappers, and a child's sock, pink with white stripes. Still warm. Daisy barked twice, then bolted behind the barn, toward the woods. Ethan didn't hesitate. He followed her into the trees, heart racing. That's when he heard it. A scream. He ran faster than he had in years. Branches slashed his face. Mud sucked at his boots. Daisy's barks rang through the trees like sirens. Then just ahead, in the clearing, a man dragging Maddie by the wrist. She was kicking, fighting, screaming. Daddy! Ethan didn't think. He tackled the man hard, both of them hitting the ground. Maddie scrambled away, crying, crawling toward Daisy. The shepherd wrapped herself around the girl protectively, snarling at anyone who came close. Ethan landed 3 solid punches before Monroe, and 2 agents pulled him off. Hargrove was bloody, broken, but alive. And Maddie said Maddie was safe. In the ambulance, Ethan sat with Maddie curled against his chest, Daisy at their feet. "Did I do good?" Maddie whispered. Ethan kissed the top of her head. "You saved yourself. Daisy just helped." Maddie smiled weakly, her fingers buried in the dog's fur. "She always finds me," she said. "She's like magic." Ethan looked down at Daisy, tired, muddy, covered in scratches. But her eyes were calm, knowing. The doctor said Maddie was lucky. A few bruises, mild dehydration, scrapes from being dragged, but no broken bones, no internal injuries. Ethan sat beside her hospital bed, hand in hers, watching her sleep. The beeping of machines was steady, calming even. Outside the window, the sky was pale gray. One of those quiet Georgia mornings when the world felt like it was holding its breath. He looked down at Daisy, curled at Maddie's feet. She hadn't slept since the rescue. Every time a nurse entered, she lifted her head and scanned the room. Her breathing was shallow, her paws were raw from running through brush and frost. But she never left Maddie's side. Neither did Ethan. Monroe stepped into the room around 10 a.m., her dark windbreaker zipped up to her chin. "We processed the barn and the surrounding property," she said softly, not wanting to wake Maddie. "More evidence, photos, devices, and a ledger." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Of what?" "Kids," she answered. "Names, ages, drop-off dates, pickup locations." She looked down. Maddie was listed, with a note, "Special care, mother was a risk." Ethan blinked. "Sarah," he whispered. "They killed her because of what she found." Monroe nodded. "There's more, Ethan, a lot more." She paused. "The man you tackled last night wasn't Hargrove." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What?" "He's one of the couriers. He's been transporting kids. Answers to Hargrove, but says he hasn't seen him in 2 weeks." She opened a file. Inside were printed stills from security footage. "We believe Hargrove fled the state, last seen in Alabama, but we have a theory." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What if he's not running?" Monroe said. "What if he's circling back?" That night, Daisy finally slept. Ethan watched the rise and fall of her chest with more reverence than he'd ever given prayer. He sat beside Maddie, tracing the shape of her small fingers. She stirred, half dreaming, and murmured something he hadn't heard since she was 4. "Mommy says Daisy's a knight." Ethan's throat closed up. At 2:45 a.m., the hospital alarm buzzed. A nurse ran in. "She's gone!" Ethan bolted upright. "Who?" But it wasn't Maddie. It was Daisy. They found her down the hall, nose pressed to the glass of the security exit, tail stiff, ears locked forward. When Ethan reached her, she barked once, then again, urgent. A security guard ran over, confused. She pushed the door plate with her paw. "That only opens for—" He stopped, because in the parking lot, a red pickup truck had just peeled away into the night. An hour later, Monroe stood in the hospital room holding a torn glove and a disposable camera wrapped in a Ziploc bag. "Someone tried to break into the hospital," she said. "We found marks on the maintenance entrance and traces of shoe prints. Same pattern as the courier's boots." She pointed at the camera. "Found this behind the generator, the last image on it, a photo of Maddie through the hospital window." Ethan leaned against the wall, sick to his stomach. "He's watching," he said. "He's still close." For the next 2 days, Maddie was moved to a secure location outside of town. Daisy went too, by Maddie's side like a silent sentinel. Ethan returned home for the first time in weeks. The farmhouse was dark, cold, and smelled like unopened mail and dirt. But the worst part was the silence. That kind of silence that didn't mean peace, just absence. He turned on a few lights, made coffee, didn't drink it. Instead, he wandered into Sarah's old office. Dust still covered the framed awards on the walls, her journalism degree, a photo of her holding baby Maddie. A sticky note still clung to her computer monitor. "Trust yourself. Tell the truth." Ethan sat down in her chair and stared. He opened her bottom drawer. Inside was a shoebox with the word "unfinished" written on the lid. Inside, notes, clippings, old USB drives, Articles about youth camps, missing kids, charity tax filings, and a contact card for someone named Clay Bishop, a retired corrections officer in rural Alabama. Underneath it all, a notebook labeled "He Knows About Me." Sarah's handwriting. He flipped it open. The first entry was dated 6 months before she died. "I think he followed me home today. Smelled like gasoline. Spoke to Maddie like he knew her. I smiled like it was nothing. But I knew. He knows." Ethan closed the book, his hands shaking. She hadn't just been suspicious. She'd been hunted. The FBI ran Bishop's name. He died in a fire 2 years ago, except the body was never DNA confirmed. Only dental records provided by a friend named Vince Hargrove. That night, back at the safe house, Maddie asked Ethan a question she hadn't before. "Daddy, why did he take me?" Ethan didn't know what to say, so he knelt beside her. "Because you're strong," he said. "Because Mommy was brave, and bad people are scared of brave girls." Maddie thought about that. Is Daisy brave too? The bravest. Maddie looked down at Daisy. "She didn't bark a lot when I was locked up, but she was loud inside." Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" Maddie pointed to her chest. "Right here, like a heartbeat. I felt her. I knew she was coming." On the fourth day, Daisy limped into the kitchen and dropped something at Ethan's feet. A dog tag. Old, rusted, engraved with Bishop. Ethan stared at it. "Where did you find this?" Maddie answered. "She had it in her mouth when she came back from the yard. Dug it up near the swing tree." Ethan grabbed his jacket. The swing tree had been there since before Maddie was born, planted by Sarah's grandparents. Daisy led him to the base of it, where fresh earth had been overturned. Ethan dug with his hands again. This time he found a small lockbox wrapped in plastic. Inside, a second thumb drive. A Polaroid of Hargrove standing beside a man posing as Bishop. A burner phone. The phone had only one saved video. Ethan pressed play. It was Sarah sitting in this very yard. "If this reaches you, I'm gone. But that means Daisy did her job. You know what to do now, Ethan. You always did. Just believe it, even when it hurts." At 2 a.m., Daisy started barking again. Monroe got the alert through the microchip signal they'd been quietly monitoring for days. "She's on the move," she said. Ethan didn't hesitate. "She's not going alone." They followed Daisy deep into the woods outside Fair Hollow, near an abandoned rail station. She led them to a train car rotting under pine trees. Inside, nothing, just dust, and a note, taped to the wall. "You came too late." Under it, a photo. Maddie, eyes wide, crying. Time stamped an hour earlier. But it wasn't true. They checked cameras in town. And there, 2 blocks from the safe house, was the red pickup. Still moving, still watching. Back at the farmhouse, Ethan stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, Daisy beside him. "I'm not running anymore," he whispered. Daisy didn't bark. She just looked into the trees, waiting. Daisy didn't move. She stood like a statue at the edge of the porch, her body angled toward the trees, every muscle rigid, like she could sense the earth shifting beneath her paws. Ethan stood beside her, shotgun lowered, but heart ready. The wind picked up through the Georgia pines, whispering like ghosts through branches that had seen too many winters. A flicker of headlights in the distance, then darkness again. "Come on," Ethan muttered. "Show your face." Behind them, inside the farmhouse, Maddie slept curled on the couch, Daisy's old blanket over her legs and a flashlight clutched in one hand. She hadn't spoken since the photo in the train car. Not out of fear, out of resolve. She was waiting too. The FBI had posted unmarked units up the road, 2 men on foot behind the barn, and a drone circling overhead. But still, Monroe wasn't comfortable. "He's smart," she told Ethan earlier. "He's not going to kick down your front door. He's going to wait. Watch. Choose his moment." Ethan didn't doubt that. But he knew one more thing. Daisy would see him before anyone else did. At 3:41 a.m., the house phone rang. Not Ethan's cell, not the secure FBI line. The landline, the one Sarah had insisted they keep just in case. He answered on the second ring. The voice was calm, smooth, familiar. "You really should have left town, Ethan." Ethan's grip tightened. "It's over, Hargrove." "No, it's just begun." Click! Ethan slammed the phone down and turned to Monroe. "He's coming tonight." She nodded. "We're ready." But Ethan wasn't sure anyone really was. 10 minutes later, Daisy growled. Low and guttural. A shadow moved behind the barn. Then another near the back fence. The agents moved in, flashlights cutting across the field. Empty. False alarm. That's when the explosion hit. The unmarked sedan stationed down the road, engulfed in flame. A decoy. A diversion. Monroe shouted orders through her earpiece. "Perimeter compromised. Repeat. He's moving." Ethan ran inside. Maddie was already awake, crouched behind the couch. He scooped her up without a word and ran for the panic room hidden behind the pantry. He had installed it after Sarah died. "Never thought I'd need it," he muttered as he keyed in the code. "You were right," Maddie whispered. She looked up at him. "Where's Daisy?" Ethan's blood ran cold. She wasn't in the living room, not in the hallway, not in the backyard. Then he heard it, a bark, sharp, panicked. From the woods, he grabbed a flashlight, then the revolver Monroe had returned to him. "You're not going alone," she warned, appearing in the doorway. Ethan looked her dead in the eye. "She saved my daughter, twice. I'm not letting her face him alone." They followed the sound through the woods, flashlights dancing across leaves and fallen branches. 100 yards out, Daisy's barking stopped. They reached a clearing with an old stone well in the center. Ethan's stomach dropped. Daisy was there, standing over something, a body. Monroe knelt and checked for vitals. "He's alive, it's the courier." Same man Ethan had tackled in the woods days earlier. But now he had something new taped to his chest. A burner phone. It rang. Monroe picked up. The voice was crystal clear. "You found him, good. He talked, that's disappointing." "Hargrove," Monroe said. "We have you, it's only a matter of time." He chuckled. "You always think you're closer than you are. Tell Ethan I left something in the garage." Click. They raced back to the farmhouse. In the corner of the garage, inside an old ammo box, was a USB drive taped to a folded shirt. Sarah's shirt. Ethan's hands shook as he plugged it into Monroe's laptop. One video, one folder, titled "Oof, Room." The video started. It was Sarah, sitting in her office, eyes tired but bright. "If you're watching this, Ethan, then I didn't make it. I knew this was coming. I got too close. Hargrove isn't acting alone. There's a network. They're embedded. Charities, law enforcement, churches. They find vulnerable kids, then reassign them under the radar. I followed the money. I followed the vehicles. I followed the scent." She paused, smiled. "Daisy knows. I trained her. Not just for comfort, for purpose. I left breadcrumbs, Ethan. For her. For you. And Maddie, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I love you more than stars, more than skies. But you're braver than I ever was." The screen went black. Monroe opened the folder labeled Truth. Hundreds of files. Flight logs, emails, videos of transport hubs, tax fraud, names, powerful names, and photos of children, including Maddie, tagged with dates and destination codes. "This is it," Monroe whispered. "This is what she died for." Ethan stared at the screen. "This is what we finish." They moved Maddie and Daisy to a federal safe house. That night, Ethan sat alone in the farmhouse. He walked through each room like it was the last time. The fridge still had one of Maddie's drawings from second grade, a photo of Sarah pinned to the bulletin board. Their old wedding song played faintly from the Bluetooth speaker Maddie had turned on by accident earlier. He was about to leave when headlights flashed across the front yard. One car, then another, unmarked, uninvited. Ethan reached for his revolver and ducked behind the curtain. The porch light flickered once. Then again, the power went out. From the woods, Daisy barked. But this bark wasn't panic. It was fury, and Ethan knew she was warning him. He opened the door and stepped out. There in the moonlight stood Hargrove, alone, smiling. "You've got something that belongs to me," he said. Ethan raised the revolver. "You're done." But Hargrove didn't flinch. "You really think you're the only one she told?" That's when Ethan saw the second shadow, crawling toward the back door. Another man, another player. But then Daisy came flying out of the trees. She tackled the second man mid-sprint, knocking him to the ground, teeth bared. Ethan fired once. Hargrove dropped to one knee. The agents swarmed seconds later, Monroe leading the charge. It was over in under a minute, but it felt like a lifetime. Back in the hospital the next day, Ethan knelt beside Daisy's crate. She had a gash on her side and needed stitches, but she wagged her tail when Maddie approached. "You saved us again," she whispered. Daisy licked her hand once, then closed her eyes. Peaceful, safe. The final raid came 3 days later, led by Monroe, supported by every agent who'd seen Sarah's evidence. Dozens arrested, children rescued, churches and charities shut down. Sarah's name became a headline, but to Ethan and Maddie, she was never a hero. She was Mom, the one who never stopped fighting, just like Daisy, just like them. 6 weeks later, the headlines had changed. What once read, "Local girl abducted," now read, "Hero dog helps uncover national trafficking ring." Journalist legacy sparks reform. Sarah Walker, a voice that wouldn't be silenced. But in Fair Hollow, people weren't thinking about newspaper clippings or federal cases. They were thinking about a little girl, her domain, and the father who didn't stop running, not when it mattered. The farmhouse was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel haunted. Maddie had returned home, and though her world had shifted, she hadn't lost her wonder. Her sketchbook was already half full again. Her newest drawing was taped to the fridge. Daisy, wearing a cape, flying above the clouds, tail like a lightning bolt. At the bottom, in careful purple letters, she'd written, "My hero." Ethan stood on the porch that morning with a mug of black coffee and Daisy lying at his feet. She was healing slower this time. Age had caught up. But her tail still wagged when Maddie opened the screen door or when Ethan dropped a bit of bacon near his plate. She wasn't chasing through the woods anymore, but she didn't have to. She had already brought her home. Monroe visited on a Sunday. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual windbreaker. She brought donuts and updates. "The last wave of arrests is being processed," she said, sitting on the porch swing with Maddie. "You did it," Ethan said. "All of you." Monroe smiled. "We just followed the trail." She looked down at Daisy. "She lit it for us." The town of Fair Hollow held a ceremony that weekend at the high school auditorium. It wasn't flashy. No TV crews. Just people. Neighbors, farmers, teachers, kids in their Sunday clothes, and one very special German shepherd. The mayor gave a short speech. He called Sarah a local treasure, Ethan a model of perseverance, and Daisy a symbol of everything that's right in this world. Then he stepped aside so Maddie could speak. She was nervous, clutching her notebook, standing on a step stool behind the podium. But when she looked at Daisy, sitting in the front row with a red bandana around her neck, she smiled. "I was scared a lot," she said, "but I always felt Daisy close, even when she wasn't with me, like her heart was connected to mine. She didn't bark all the time. She didn't growl. She just knew. She followed clues and she followed love. That's how she found me." The crowd went quiet. Then applause. Maddie stepped down and hugged Daisy tight. After the ceremony, families came forward with tears in their eyes. One mother whispered, "My son was missing last year. Now I wonder." A grandfather said, "You're a brave little girl, and your mama raised you right." Someone left a bouquet of daisies on the truck windshield with a note, "For the dog who never gave up." Back home, Ethan opened a drawer in Sarah's old desk. He pulled out the thumb drive labeled Truth and placed it in a locked box beside her wedding ring. "She left us the pieces," he said softly to Monroe, who stood beside him. Monroe nodded. "And you put them together." He shook his head. "No, we did." That evening, Ethan and Maddie took Daisy down to the pond. The sun was setting gold over the tree line, water glass smooth. A few fireflies blinked early. Ethan brought a folding chair. Maddie brought a speaker, playing Sarah's favorite bluegrass song. And Daisy? She just laid her head on Maddie's lap like it had never left. Ethan unfolded a piece of paper he'd written that morning. It wasn't a legal document, or a letter to the FBI, or another one of Sarah's breadcrumb clues. It was something simpler, a promise. He read it aloud, voice catching on the edges. "To my daughter Maddie, I will always listen. I will always protect you, even when it's hard, even when I'm scared, even when I don't have all the answers. Because you believed in me, and Daisy believed in you, and Mommy believed in us." Maddie took his hand. Daisy thumped her tail twice against the grass. They buried the paper under the swing tree, beside the box where Sarah had once hidden her drive. On a small wooden plaque, Maddie had written, "This is where heroes leave messages." By spring, things had changed, but gently. Maddie had returned to school. Kids treated her a little differently now. Not with pity, but respect. One even asked if Daisy could come for show and tell. Ethan started helping at the local shelter, training dogs who had been given up on. Dogs who were labeled too broken or too old. He knew better now. Sometimes the ones with the most scars had the most love left to give. Monroe called every week from D.C., where she'd been promoted to a new task force thanks to Sarah's evidence. "I still can't believe a dog cracked this case," she said during one of their last calls. Ethan laughed. "She didn't crack it," he said. "She carried it." One warm evening in June, Ethan sat by the porch steps watching Maddie and Daisy chase each other in the tall grass. Daisy couldn't run far anymore, but she still tried. She barked playfully and Maddie giggled. It was a sound Ethan had missed, the kind that made life feel possible again. Later that night, Maddie curled up on the couch beside him, her head on his shoulder. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Yeah? Do you think Daisy knew everything all along?" He looked down at the sleeping shepherd, the notched ear, the scars, the calm eyes. "I think she knew more than we ever did." And with that, the house grew quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels like something's missing. The kind of quiet that feels like peace. Thank you for following this journey. From the moment Daisy burst into those woods to the day she brought Maddie home, This was never just a story about danger or rescue. It was about loyalty, love, and the silent strength of those who never stop searching. We want to ask you, have you ever had a tool? I have had a dog or any pet that understood you better than most people. If your dog tried to lead you somewhere, would you follow? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, please consider subscribing to Heroes for Animals for more powerful stories of rescue, redemption, and the incredible animals who change lives. From our hearts to yours, thank you.